The one thing that most people do not discuss today is the spirituality of UFOs. And each part of it, that is the gloom doom, the spiritual, and you, is essential if you're to have a full understanding of ufology. 4 years ago, I distanced myself from the UFO community and my contemporaries, and I said to them, unless you can bring the people alternatives, unless you can bring them the truth, unless you can inject into all this harem-scarum, gloom-doom stuff a note of spirituality and hope, I'll have nothing to do with it. So I made my stand 4 years ago and distanced myself from them. I'm the only one, as far as I know, throughout the world who talks about the spiritual aspects of ufology. And indeed, the bottom line is that UFOs are spiritual in nature. They are not what we think in terms of hardware and extraterrestrials who are cloned, and some of them are, and the people from, let's say, the reticuli and so forth, the little gray men and all this. These things are true. But when you look at it from a higher point of consciousness and view, you will find out that indeed it is a spiritual experience. Each time you look at a UFO, you're looking at a part of you. How's that set with you? You're looking at a part of you. You're looking at a part of your consciousness which has always been there and is manifesting in a way that, number one, it gets your attention. Number two, it hits you deep within spiritually, and you have a realization that I was once there. Now, what's happening at this time, and don't get discouraged now, because I will get into the harem-scarum later on, but I want to preface it all with the spiritual denotation so that you have a better understanding later on of what the whole thing is about. Some years ago, 1980, I was lecturing before 800 some odd people in Oakland Auditorium, Oakland, California. And we had 4 days. It was called UFO Symposium 1980. And I was one of the feature speakers. Wendell Stevens, Colonel Wendell Stevens, myself, were the two principal speakers. At the end of the conference, we had a question and answer period. And I'll never forget the little lady's name. Her name was Clarion. And she had such a clear, resonant, Tinkerbell type of voice. I mean, when she spoke, she was distinct from anybody else. She was real joy. And she was a little lady, and she dressed in a sort of a dowdy way and what have you, but you could never doubt that she was a special being. So she says, I have a question for Virgil. She called me Posty in those days. And she said, can you give us a succinct statement regarding UFOs as to their true reality? Well, as often happens to me when I'm up before a large crowd and lecturing and what have you, things come out of my mouth which I least expect. And they're out there, and I said, who said that? You know, what caused me to say that? So these profound things come through me, and sometimes I have to pretend that I'm doing it with great wisdom when I'm not at all. It's coming through me, you see. So at that moment, what came out of my mouth really surprised me. Without hesitation, I said to her, indeed I can. I can give you a succinct statement as to what UFOs are really about. And I said at that point in time, I said, it is a point in time of consciousness, yours and mine. I want you to take that home with you and think about it. It is a point in time of consciousness, yours and mine, and we could say theirs. It's always been there. It will always be there. It is nothing new. If you go back into biblical research, you will find no less than 12 noted prophets and speakers or beings in the Bible who had UFO experiences. They may have called it by a different name. In other words, chariots of fire, you know, wheels within wheels, and columns of fire and so forth. They had references to it, but the reference to that was in the framework of their thinking and state-of-the-art of the technology at that time. It wasn't too long ago, for instance, right here in this country, before we began to see these sleek spherical objects that we now call UFOs, that our forefathers, going back to your great-grandparents and beyond, were seeing sailing craft the old master schooners, actually flying through the heavens, you see, going from one horizon to the other. And they viewed them, of course, as sailing craft as opposed to these sleek objects we see today. Now, there's a learning lesson in this that you see. And that is, as technology, of course, becomes greater, and as our awareness becomes greater, and we are oriented towards technology, then, of course, the object that we're going to see of that same energy we're talking about is going to be technologically oriented towards our current thinking and state-of-the-art technology. So this is why we see UFOs in the form that we do today, you see. It's the same old energy. It's always been there. But we are viewing it, of course, in the perceptive, if you will, or perception of what we think is real. But it's the same energy. Now, like our energy, yours or mine or anybody in that room, there is so-called good or bad. And you notice I said so-called because there is no such thing as good or bad. There only is. It's the judgments that we have that make it what it is, you see. And so even when we deal with UFOs, we have to categorize them into the two categories of good or bad. And there is the third category where we could say indifferent, because there are those amongst us who, of course, are, and I'm talking extraterrestrially, who are indifferent or they are amoral. They have no feelings for you and I whatsoever. They look very much like we do, but they indeed would squash you like a bug if they had to, because the only thing they're concerned about is themselves and what it is that they need at this time. Which brings up another very important point, and that is, since the planet is in the process of graduating, and indeed we are, we're graduating this time around from the third dimension into the fourth and fifth. Now, this is unique because in the normal progression of things, you always move from one level of consciousness to the other progressively. This time, though, we as a planet, we as a peoples, and we as a consciousness are making a quantum leap into the future, and we're going simultaneously into the fourth and fifth dimension. Now, there's a reason for that, and it's basically could be referred to as catch-up, because we are a laggard planet. At least we have been in the past. But now we have turned out to be one of the most important planets in the whole scheme of God or the Creator's things. We have become unique because we have ended up being the toughest learning school there is in the whole universe. There's none other tougher than planet Earth. And if you come down here and do your job successfully, you are guaranteed, when you go back over there, of great things. The truth is that each and every one of you sitting here today is a God, and you don't know it. Jesus told us 2,000 years ago. He warned us, and he told us in a very gentle way, through an admonition which he rendered to the Pharisees. He said, "Know ye not that ye are gods?" Now, the reason he said that is the Pharisees were hassling him about saying he and the Father were one. And he would say, "The Father and I are one." What he was telling them at that point was that he was God personified in body to come down here to experience that which he had created. There's a book back there called The 12 Women Apostles, and I spell that out in that book in a very gentle way so that it is not totally offensive to fundamentalist religion and what have you. But nonetheless, when you read the prophetic statements in there, you'll see indeed to what he was referring to, that he was God, the Creator, down here in a personified body to experience that which he, of course, had created. And the Pharisees were consistently taking him to task, and finally one day they said, "How dare you say that you and the Father are one?" And this is when he turned on them, finally in exasperation, and said, "For God's sake, go read your books, for in your books it says, 'Know ye not that ye are gods?'" So the truth is, if you were to be in my full array of my presentation, this is one of the things that I make very clear, is that each and every one of us are gods in amnesia. You know, there's a long, long story that goes with it, and I'll probably get into it later on, but we've been genetically altered, and we have been, shall we say, what's the proper word for it? Anyhow, we have been genetically altered and seduced, I guess is a good word for it, into believing that we are what we are when indeed we are not. Now, to go back to what I said about the graduation and jumping from one dimension to the other, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Believe it or not, within our solar system, there are 12 planets, not the customary 9 that the astrologers use and so forth. There are 3 additional planets above the 9 and above the moon and the sun. And of the 12, Earth is one. All other planets, the 11 other planets, have reached a point of ascendancy wherein they are ready to move out of the 3rd dimension into the 4th dimension. And the one that is not quite ready yet, of course, is our little planet called planet Earth. So this is why we are experiencing all the things that we are at this point in time in terms of duress and stress and wars and fratricide and all the things, of course, which are predominant throughout the world today. We are going through a cleansing process in order to be able to ascend and join the sisterhood and the brotherhood of planets who await us. Our solar system cannot graduate from the 3rd into the 4th dimension until such time planet Earth, that little planet here, joins the sisters and brothers. And then at that point, of course, we are ready to move with the rest into the 4th and 5th dimension. Now, that's happening to you right now. Now, this is another reason why you have such frequency and intensity of UFO sightings today. This is another reason why you are so aware and keen and interested in that subject called ufology. But however, unless it's looked at spiritually as I'm giving you today, in other words, the insight that I'm giving you today, it cannot be anything but frightening and derogatory in nature and cause you to become imbalanced. So this is why I always introduce more or less the overall picture first to give you some idea that these things are a part and parcel of you, that they've always been there, they always will be, and you are taking unto yourself what you perceive. Now, all of this, and I'd like to now branch into another aspect of this, which I think is quite interesting. I have many books which are long out of date. You might get them. Here's one called Secrets of UFOs. This was put out by Don Elkins back in the 70s, and they are some of the most profound writings that's ever been rendered on the subject of ufology. Don and others, of course, dealt with what we would call today abductees, only they refer to them as contactees. And there are many, many more contactees than there are abductees, you say. And these contactees are spiritual in nature. These are spiritual experiences vis-a-vis the horrendous things that we read about in Whitley Strieber's books and things of this nature. The one common characteristic throughout all of these books, and incidentally all of the dialogue in here and the examples of the people who were under hypnosis who related what they were experiencing at the time, each and every one of them always brought in the spirituality of their UFO experience. Without exception, each one said that they were previously introduced here on Earth from a UFO, an unidentified flying object, an extraterrestrial craft. Their memories, when they relate under hypnosis where they came from and how they got here, the alikeness is startling. They come from a different planet. Their primary mode of transportation is, of course, in a spacecraft. And when they were introduced here into Earth, up to a degree, a certain level of consciousness, they were in a UFO to get here. They give full recall and recollection of actually parting from their, say,